that.
Yes.
Yep. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see.
So overcoming racial inequality in the marketplace. In a nutshell, let's start with the definitions first. You know, what is race? Because I think it's important to kind of have a bit of a definition, because this will kind of guide us in our conversation. And I think you can define race in so many different ways, but in summary, it's just a grouping based on shared physical or social qualities, generally viewed as distinct by society. So you can see, based on that definition, it's a very subjective construct, if you like. It's all down to how these groups are being viewed by society. So it's not the fact that this group is very different to another group, or whether that this one group is, people in that group are very similar to each other, but it's just that as a society we've deemed them as one group, we've deemed them as having qualities that are similar. For instance, when you talk of blacks, you know, sometimes there is this notion that you think like all blacks would think the same, all blacks would be offended by the same things, all blacks would speak the same language even, think. But no, blacks are very different. I mean, even in Africa, even Africans are very different. If you go in West Africa, people are very different. Even in West Africa alone, people from different countries are very different. Even if you go to one country, you find people that are very different. So when you talk of race, it's like clustering people together, but it does not necessarily mean that these people are the same or different. It's just a social construct. And by social construct, what do you mean? It's just an identity which is assigned based on rules made by society, basically. You just made these rules. For instance, why is a mixed race person a black person? Because at the moment, for instance, they would say that Barack Obama was the first black president in America, but was he? No, he was mixed race. Why is he considered black? I mean, so that's what I'm saying. It is a social construct. It's just the way the society perceives you to be that determines your race, rather than who you really are. Because if you're really describing someone's race, you actually go to really what their ethnic origin is. But that's not what race definition is. The race definition is just a grouping based on what the society perceives you to be. Yeah, and the next thing is, what is racial inequality? Because that's mainly where our discussion is going to be on racial inequality and the challenges that we need to overcome. So basically, this is disparity in opportunity and treatment that occurs as a result of someone's race. So it's just that disparity in opportunity and treatment. And what do I mean by that? It means that you might, it's just that fact that some people may be not necessarily favored, but they tend to be overrepresented in certain areas or certain disciplines of life, if you like, than other groups, and that may be because of multiple factors. But what seems to be creeping out a lot as far as matters of race is concerned is racial inequality, in the sense that you'd have people of certain race doing better or faring better in certain areas, whether that be in business, in employment, in recreation, in prominence, in power, in politics, anywhere. So that's what racial inequality, in essence, that's what it is. That it is that disparity in opportunity and in treatment. Now, to clarify things here, equal opportunity is not the same as equal treatment. What do I mean by that? Because I've heard this so many times. People will justify themselves by thinking they are offering equal opportunities because they say, oh, we are treating everybody the same. Now, I'll pose this as a question to kind of give you a bit of an analogy to see where I'm coming from. If you have two children and one has a physical disability and the other doesn't, and you're trying to get them to do physical activity outside, if you treat them the same and you're going out with both of them out to play with them, chances are you'll end up playing with just one and the other will just be sitting there doing nothing. And now, would you say you're being fair to them both because you're treating them the same? No, you're not. because a fair treatment very much depends on the circumstances of the recipient of that treatment. And that same analogy can be applied in the case of race, that the fact that someone is treating two people coming from different backgrounds the same does not mean that that person is treating them equal. Because to treat people equal is to ensure that they have the same opportunity, and not just having the same opportunity, but they can access that opportunity just the same. So equal opportunity also goes with equal access. You know, equality of opportunity also goes with equal access. So it's all about access. That can these people access these resources? Can they access these services? Can they access this level of development and achievement? So when we talk of racial inequality, I think we need to have that mindset as well, that it is not the same as equal treatment. We're not looking for equal treatment, because equal treatment is not enough in that sense. Let's carry on. I haven't got many slides. I've only got, I think, about 9 slides, and I think this is our 3rd or our 4th one already. So we're doing good. Ideological polarization. Ideological polarization. Now, basically, that term seems a bit of a mouthful, a bit ambiguous, but I'll explain it. You'll get where I'm coming from. The problems we have today in society is that we are so polarized. The world is full of extremities. Everything is to the extreme. When we talk about the environment, people go all the way to the extreme. When people talk about climate change, they go all the way to the extreme. When you talk about race relations, people go to the extremes. You know, you have the Black Lives Matter movement on one extreme. You've got another group like white supremacists in America at the other extreme. Everything is an extreme, and as a result of that, it forces the society to kind of polarize. You know, it's either you're with us or you're against us. There is that sort of mentality, and therefore there has not been a freedom of expression of thought, or a freedom of perspective, if you like, when it comes to matters of race. And to me, I think that is not a very healthy thing. In America, there is a lady called Candace Owens. I don't know if any of you have heard about her. She's quite a vocal figure and quite a political activist, but she's Black. But most of her activism seemed to contradict most of the Blacks' movements, if you like, and most of the Blacks' agendas, if you like. But it is not so much that she's against Black movements, no, but it's because she has taken a slightly different stance to what seems to be an extremely polarized version of what Blacks movements should be, or civil rights movements should be. Then she's in the wrong, if you know what I mean. Now, don't get me wrong. There are things she says I'm like so opposed to her, but I still appreciate that she has the right to have a slightly different point of view, because we need to have that sort of conversation. And I think that's the space that is missing. I think when it comes to the conversation about race and these matters, that sort of middle ground. Not compromise necessarily, but that sort of freedom of thought and expression and ideologies, and kind of having to think outside the box, if you like, or outside the confinements of these structures and these extremes, if you like. So you've got blamers and you have deniers. I mean, on one end you have blamers. Blamers are like those who, when it comes to matters of race, the only conversation they would have is when they're pointing finger to the other side and saying, you are wrong, you have caused us to be where we are, you know, it is your fault, it is, you know, the colonizers' fault. We are poor because we were colonized, we were poor because of racism, I didn't get a job because of... So you have that side where all the fallout goes to the other side. So they keep pointing fingers, and that's what they do. So that's one extreme, okay? And then you have the other extreme of deniers. Now, deniers can be Black or white. They don't have to be white. They can be even Black. They are the ones that they will go to the length and say, there is no racism. You know, everything is up to you. If you want to succeed, you can always succeed. You know, there is no limitation. If you are failing, it is not because of racism. You're failing because you haven't you haven't decided to succeed. And therefore they are deniers. They do not acknowledge that this thing is real and that it does affect and it does have an impact on society and races. And so, and fun enough, you have people from all sides kind of fitting into these groups. I know a few celebrities that fall into the deniers category. They are black, they are very successful. When it comes to the matter of race, they deny it completely. It's like, oh, there is no racism in America. Every problem is a societal problem. It has nothing to do with race. You know, anyone can succeed. So you have these extremes. The other one is the activists versus conservationists. I've already talked about this. One side you've got the BLM movements and all the other ones. It also goes into other matters like the eco things. You've got the Greta Thunberg? What's her name? I can't remember that girl. And the likes that are so extreme on one side of activism, and then you've got the conservationists on the other side who just want to keep their lives as they are, you know, the status quo. They just want to keep things as they are. And they're so polarized, they can't come to the middle ground and come see how they can make things happen. Now, very quickly, I just want to talk about the pathology of racism. Now, I have very deliberately chosen a medical term to describe this. I've called it pathology of racism, which basically means, pathology just means how something brings harm, if you like. So when you're talking of pathology of a certain illness, or a pathology of cancer, or pathology of this infection or that, basically you're trying to see how that disease or that problem or that virus or that whatever is causing harm to the body. So that when you're studying that, we call it pathology. So now I want to look at the pathology of racism. Now, the reason I've taken that medical analogy is because in a way, racism is very much like a disease. Why do I mean by that? Have you ever heard of what we call autoimmune diseases? With autoimmune diseases, basically, it is your body fighting against itself. Sometimes you might have an infection, like a virus or something, which might cause you a little bit of an illness, not too bad, something that you could have survived. But then your body's immunity, when it kicks in, it actually causes you more harm than what the virus caused you in the first place. And that's what we call autoimmune effect, that you end up being even sicker, and sometimes you could even die out of your own body's reaction to the virus. And therefore, actually, your reaction has become even worse than the effect of that disease to start with. And racism is very much like that as well. That racism is very real, the same way that the virus is very real. But sometimes the effects of racism that are being felt by the ethnic minority, there is a huge element of it that can be attributed to our reaction to the racism out there. I don't know if you understand what I mean. And during the conversation, we'll see more of that. And therefore, when we look at racism, it's very important to also look inwards, apart from pointing fingers out and say, I'm not successful because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's because of inequalities, it's because of segregation. It is important to look inside and say, right, all that is true and it's there, but how is that affecting me to do what I need to do? And what do I need to do to overcome that effect? And that, I think that is like the mainstay and the fundamental area where this conversation today should go. That we may not just turn into, we don't want this to turn into an hour of just venting out our frustrations and grievances. This has happened to me, that has happened to me, this is why we're not successful, and end it there. Because unfortunately, so many of our conversations when it comes to racism have ended there. But we want to go further and say, right, now maybe at the moment when we're not in a position to change 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe we don't have the power, maybe we don't have the influence at the moment. But what can I do? What can we do to circumvent these challenges? I think that should be the aim of our conversation. So there are 4 areas that I've picked up there. There is a historical context to it when it comes to pathology, which obviously things like colonialism, things like slavery, things like whatever that has happened in the past, that somehow have led to a cascade of events that have brought us to where we are. That is very real, and it is there, and it is true, and it is really affecting us to this day. And it's something that needs to be appraised. It is something that needs to be acknowledged, and it's something that needs to be addressed. It's very important. The second one is the structural, institutional, or systemic racism. And we see this being spoken about a lot these days, especially on the backdrop of what's happened in America, the Black Lives Matter movement, George Floyd's death, police brutality, all these things that we hear every day. It's all about structural and institutional and systemic racism that they're trying to address. So that is also very real. It's a real problem, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. Another one, I've called it cultural. I call it cultural racism because it's very, sometimes we don't see it as racism, but in a way it is. That we naturally, as human beings, we tend to congregate and aggregate towards the people that we are like. Either we share a language, or we look alike, or we share experiences. Experiences are very important. Ideologies, faith. People tend to congregate based on the similarities. I call that the fish shoaling phenomenon, because fish do that. When you see a fish school, lots of fish going in the same direction, usually it will be the same kind of fish doing that. They tend to congregate together, the same type of fish doing the same thing. So even us as humans, as races, as people, as groups, we tend to do the same thing as well. So that itself may lead to situations, scenarios, things that may find other people, especially the minorities, to feel like they are being left out, because the majority, if they tend to kind of aggregate towards each other, to gravitate towards each other, then the others kind of feel left in the fringes of society, and therefore you have racial inequalities as a result. And the last one is reactive, which is what I just described, like in autoimmune disease, that sometimes our reactions, what we do as a result, may end up hampering our own progress, if you like. Let's carry on. Now let's look at the objectives. What are we trying to do here today? First, we're trying to dissect the truth about racism and racial inequality. So it's very important. Like I said before, we are appraising and accepting. We're not denying anything. To appraise that this is a real problem and that we need to address it. The second thing is to shift the focus to self, what I just described. That yes, there is a problem out there, and obviously we need to be activists and really address those issues. But also there is a place for us to look inside to see what can we do to overcome these things on a personal basis and on a day-to-day basis, because we're not going to wait until everything is equal, everything is sorted in a structural basis before we can start making strides forward. And finally, the practical strategies to overcome racial inequality. We need to go to be more practical today, and I would love the discussion today to be very practical, talk about things in a practical sense, and see how we can move forward. Right. Statistics. I love statistics. So I've got a couple of statistics here. I'm going to go through them really quickly, but it's important to look at these statistics because they kind of paint a picture of where we are at. And I've tried to pick up the statistics that apply to the UK, because most of us, that's where we are. And then if you have any other statistics that you think is very important and you want to share with us, you can always share with us at the end, or you can put it on the chat section so that we can have a bit of a dialogue there. The first one is about police interaction. It says stop and search rates between 2018 and 19 show that blacks are now nearly 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched by police than whites. That is a scary statistic. More than 10 times, nearly 10 times. So there you have it. So that shows the inequality I was talking about. Does it mean blacks, you have more black than whites out there? No, you actually have more whites than blacks. But so it is not the matter of numbers. It is just a matter of that blacks are more likely to be stopped. The second one, beg your pardon. White British have home ownership. This is about home ownership. White British have home ownership rates nearly double that of Black Caribbean and more than treble that of Black African. These minorities are instead vastly overrepresented when it comes to private renting and social housing. Again, this seems to be the case, not just in the UK, same thing in America. And they talk a lot about this when they're talking about the wealth gap, because they do associate so much wealth with property ownership when it comes to economics. But then this very clearly shows that disparity, that inequality that we have between the different races here in the UK. The next one is white British students. This is in education. White British students are more than 3 times as likely to achieve high A-level grades than Black Caribbean students, according to figures from the Department of Education. Now, this is quite interesting because we know that this does not mean that blacks are dumber, that they're less academic or less intelligent. No, not at all. But we still see these statistics everywhere, and it's not just in A levels. You have the same problem even in primary schools at a much lower level, but it's still there as well. I think it's about 10%. I think the whites are like 10% more likely to succeed to get the grades in primary than their counterparts. But as it goes higher, that disparity gets bigger. So it's a real problem. And I think it's something that we really need to address, both for ourselves and also for the next generation and our children, and look at strategies how to offset that trend. The next one is blacks are seeing at least double the unemployment levels as whites between 2004 and 2018. I mean, I don't have to say any more than that, you know, especially in times of crisis like this. I'm sure this problem this disparity will be even worse. Unemployment, it tends to affect these different groups disproportionately. And finally, people from BAME backgrounds, black and minority ethnic backgrounds, are up to twice as likely to die from COVID-19 than white British. Again, this is you look at it on the surface and think, what does it mean? Does it mean we are less immune to the disease? Does it mean we are not as fit as the white population? No, it's not. But then there are limitations and blockades and difficulties that are associated with the structure and the way the society works, that somehow has resulted in some ethnic groups being in a disadvantaged position when it comes to accessing health services. And that's what, and in a crisis like this, usually these things get blown out of proportion, and you can see them more clearly. So this is not just a problem of COVID. This is just a health problem generally, that the blacks tend to have less access to health services in comparison to whites, though we have an NHS which is free for all. You remember when I said before, when you're treating everybody equally, doesn't necessarily mean that you're treating them fairly. You understand? So this is where it comes, that NHS is there for everyone, but still it still tends to favor a certain faction of the community. So these are the areas that we need to look at and see why is it so, and how can we overcome these challenges. Now let me go very quickly on the strategies. Hang on a second, let me move this thing to the side. And strategies, I have this quote from Brucey Tembekwayo. I love this quote. I was actually just listening to him this morning. He says, every excuse is valid, but it won't give you the results you want. You know, we can sit here and use racism as excuse for all our shortcomings. We can't do this because of that. We can't do this because I'm being exploited. Can't do this because of colonialism. We can't do this because of this. And all these, like I said before, because racism is real, they are very valid reasons. They're very true. But if we stick to those excuses, are they going to give us the results we want? No. So the question is, what can we do irrespective of these excuses, irrespective of these challenges, to break out of the problems that we have? And so I came up with a 4E strategy. And I mean, this is not exhaustive, and I believe during discussion we might talk about more than this. And the 4 E's are excellence, examples, effective skills, and expanding culture. I'll quickly go through them one by one. The first thing we need to do is to aim for excellence. What I tend to tell my children, me and my wife, we always tell our children, especially our older son Ethan, we always tell him, don't be average. You cannot be average. If you're an ethnic minority in this country, you cannot be average. And it's not just for children, even for adults. If you are average, if you put average effort, you'll always reap less than average results if you're an ethnic minority, because the system was not built, because of the structural racism and the institutional racism. The system is not designed for you, if you like, and therefore you will always be in a disadvantage. If you just do average, you're going to get less than average results. when the majorities, when the majority race do average, they get average results. So you're always on this disadvantage there. So the best thing to do is don't be average. Always go for excellence. And minorities always have to do more to succeed. And so I always tell my children, sometimes they come home and they say, oh, why do I have to do so much work at home? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? My friends don't do this, my friends don't do that. Why do I have to do this? I'm like, let them do what they do. You can't be average and expect to succeed in this country. You have to be exemplary. You have to stand out in a way. But there is something I just wanted to point out here. There is something I call reversed advantage in excellence for minorities. Because due to the fact that we're a minority, we tend to stand out. I mean, if you're a black person and you walk into a community where it is predominantly white, for instance, you're very easily spotted. It's very easy within a couple of days for everyone to know that there is a black person around here. You know what I mean? But if you're a white person moving into a white neighborhood, you could stay there for a long time without people really even noticing that you were there, because you're just like everybody else. You know what I mean? But that can come with an advantage. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, if you're excellent, if you're always above average, if you're very good at what you do, then you are very easily spotted, if you like, and therefore that can work to your advantage in a way, because you're so easily seen, because you're a minority and you're very different. So if you do well, that means you can very be easily spotted, and you can actually use that to your advantage. But the reverse is true as well. If you're not doing very well and you're messing things up, it's even worse, because you're also more noticed. That's why we see this a lot, even in places where you hear people complaining, oh, I did this little thing and I got picked up, they keep picking on me, but there are lots of other people doing exactly what I do, but they're not being picked on. In a way, it is true, but it's not so much because they're trying to pick on you because they hate you, but it's because being a minority, you stand out, and therefore you're almost held up to more scrutiny as a result, naturally, and therefore it is something we can use to advantage, but as well, it's very important to understand that it can affect us negatively as well. The second E, examples. What do I mean by examples? I'm talking about role models here. Any successful community has to have role models, has to have people that they look up to, that they celebrate, that their children grow up to look up to them. If you ask me a question, why you come to countries like this, in the UK, and you don't see black people in big successful positions in different areas, maybe as professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers, this, that, and the other, or any other place for that matter, in politics, anywhere. It's just because we do not have the role models. We don't have people that we can look up to and say, I want to be like you. If you go to our native countries, for instance, I come from Tanzania. In Tanzania, you have Tanzanian doctors, you have Tanzanian lawyers, you have Tanzanian presidents, you know what I mean? And therefore, children are born to see all these people, and therefore, their realm of possibilities, if you like, is much wider and much broader as they grow up, and therefore they can achieve more just as a result of that, because they have these role models. Unfortunately, when you come to a foreign land like in the UK, where we become minorities, and you don't have those role models. Every time you go to the hospital, all the doctors are whites. When you look on TVs, people of prominence are whites. When you talk of politicians, they are whites. When you talk of great business people are whites, then it kind of limits your scope of possibilities, if you like, and that can be a huge limiting factor. This is the same reason why blacks excel so much in sports, because we have lots of role models in sports. You go into football, great footballers. You have black footballers since 1970s, 1980s, you know what I mean? And therefore we've had the role models in the sports arena for so many times. Blacks are doing so well in entertainment and music. Why? Because we have so many role models. So when a young man is trying to pursue a career in music, he is thinking so high up because he has role models and he can look up to and think, I can be like such and such, I can be like such and such. And therefore that becomes like a really high bar where they can push and achieve. So examples are really, really, really important. Third one is effective skills. Now here I'm trying to make a comparison between hard and soft skills. when I talk of hard skills, you're talking of things like what sort of academic background do you have, what sort of degrees do you have, what sort of training do you have, it's mainly your education and your professional or vocational skills, mainly when you're talking of hard skills. And these are really important. Don't get me wrong. Professional skills, vocational skills are really important. Entrepreneurial skills, they're very important. These are called hard skills. But I think sometimes we have put too much emphasis on those and not enough emphasis on soft skills. How many times have you heard someone saying, "Oh, these people they didn't treat me fairly. I have a better CV than such and such. I'm more qualified than such and such, but someone has got a promotion over me, or someone got the job and I didn't. But they don't have the same qualification. I have better qualification." What we have to understand is that employers, people generally, they're looking for more than just the hard skills. They're looking for more than just qualifications. They're also looking for the soft skills. And I think soft skills are very important. And I think it is a high time now as ethnic minorities, we start putting more emphasis on soft skills. Now, when we talk of soft skills, I've got this picture here. It kind of shows a lot of things: creativity, communication, empathy, negotiation, time management, a big one for ethnic minorities, motivation, and lots of other things. But there are three things that I picked up that I think are very important: communication, attitude, and leadership. I think these are three areas that we can really choose to learn and get better, because I think a lot of us, this is where we really fall short. You're being called for an interview, your communication skills are not up to scratch, and you have your CVs, you have everything perfect, they're there, but then you can't sell yourself, if you like. So in communication, you're talking about listening. We need to develop our listening skills, not just talking. We have to be very good listeners. We have to develop our talking skills. That could be the issue of language, polishing your language, even polishing your accent, even. Because at the end, this is what I'm talking about. It comes down to you trying to get ahead, trying to give yourself an advantage. Because these things, though unspoken, but they do matter. I mean, if you're talking to someone and you're finding it difficult to understand what they're saying, and someone else comes in with exactly the same qualifications and they are very eloquent and you can hear them and understand them really well, chances are you will think naturally that this is a better person. Is he better? No, but he's just a better communicator. And therefore, it's very important for us to kind of look at these things and say, this is the situation, this is the circumstance, this is what I need to do to get ahead. Attitude, very important. We need to be passionate. If you're in business, we need to show our passion. I think part of the reason that we don't tend to be very passionate is because of that culture barrier. You're not quite sure how people will perceive you. I have this example. I usually tend to like to use this example with the Portuguese, especially. We tend to call the Portuguese as arrogant. You see Jose Mourinho, you see Cristiano Ronaldo, and now we have a player at Man United. I'm a supporter of Man United. It's called Bruno Fernandes. They're all very arrogant, very, very fulfilling, like, me, I'm going to sort you out. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I think they're not arrogant. It's just that the Portuguese culture is they have a much higher threshold for confidence and the expression of confidence as compared to the British culture, because in the British culture is a lot more modest, and they have very low threshold of confidence expression. And therefore, when you have a Portuguese with a very high threshold of confidence expression come and say this, that, and the other, the Britons will look at it and think, these guys are being arrogant. You understand? So sometimes the cultural barrier may be the reason why sometimes we tend to seclude ourselves, to kind of not really go out and express ourselves. But unfortunately, that doesn't work very well for us Blacks, because when we don't express ourselves, we leave others to define us by the narrative. How many times have you met someone and then after that person, especially someone from a different race, and then after a while of that person knowing you, he turns around and tells you, you're very different. You mean, like, what do you mean I'm different? You're different from the others. What do you mean I'm different from the others? And they mean that in a good way. They're actually telling you that as a compliment. The reason is because there is a narrative up there of what a black person is, or what a black person should be, and it's not a very good one. And therefore, once the person knows you more and realizes actually you don't fit that narrative, that's when they come to you and say, like, you're different. You understand? And so if you don't actually choose to show that passion, choose to express yourself, chances are you'll just be categorized into the narrative, and it's not going to be in your favor. So issues like open-mindedness, decisiveness, you know, you're in a place of work, something needs to get done, you need to be decisive. You're actually 100%, probably 1000% better off throwing yourself in, doing something and doing it wrong, than you saying, I'm not so sure how, what if I get it wrong, let me not do anything. And you end up being that person that never does anything, never tries anything, and everybody else goes on before you, and you wonder, why am I not being picked to do anything? The final one is leadership. Leadership is very important. Leadership simply means responsibility beyond yourself. And I think that's somewhere where we lack a lot. We lack that sense of responsibility for our communities. So many times we don't get involved in our communities. We don't get involved in our local areas. We don't get involved with affairs of our neighbors, issues. You know, there is so much going on around us, and, you know, neighborhood watch, neighborhood this, neighborhood that. There are lots of things happening, but we don't quite get ourselves involved in those things. We don't take responsibility beyond ourselves. All we care about is, I have my work, I have my job, I go to work, I get my earning, I look after my children, I look after this. That's the end of it. But then, unfortunately, that keeps reinforcing the same problem, and it keeps us on the fringes of society. And as a result, we suffer the consequences and end up being on the losing side, if you like. Now I have to admit there is a cultural element to development of social skills, and that ties up with the last thing, which is expanding culture. That when it comes to soft skills are very cultural. For instance, when I gave you the example of the Portuguese people and the British, you know, the difference, it's cultural. But then the one who look at one soft skill as strength, the Portuguese being very confident, while the British will look at it and think, oh, that's arrogance. So there is a cultural element to it. So it's very important, and that's the fourth strategy for me, for us to expand our cultural adeptness, if you like, or cultural awareness. To be more culturally aware of what's happening around us, or what the prevailing culture, the predominant culture around us, what it means to be good, for instance, in UK terms. You understand? For instance, if you see three West African people walking down the street talking, for a white man, he might think these guys are actually just about to have a go at each other. These guys are going to throw punches in a minute, because these people will be loud, will be throwing hands everywhere, will be very, very animated, facial expressions, almost like aggressive, that narrative of an aggressive black man. You know what I mean? Because that's the narrative. That's how it gets perceived on the other culture. But is that really what it is? It isn't. It's just because it's a different culture. To them, they're having fun. They're just talking very loud, throwing hands together, very aggressive, but that's just the way of them communicating. So the cultural element of it is very important. And what I'm saying here, I'm not saying that we should ditch our culture. That's not what I'm saying, far from it. But we just need to be more cultural adept and more cultural adaptable, if you like, and be able to, and be more sensitive to these. Because if we don't, chances are, because culture does affect every area of our lives, eventually it will work against us, because we will be judged wrongly because we have not quite understood the other's culture and they haven't understood ours. So I think that's really important. And yeah, problems with culture can lead to lack of integration. You can't integrate because you don't have the same experiences. I mean, for instance, sometimes I personally find it difficult. If I'm gonna sit with a, say I've gone for my son's football, and there are a couple of other parents there, mostly Caucasians, bringing their children as well for football. So we're standing on the side, we're having a bit of a small talk, talking here and there. I might find it really difficult to connect to them, not so much because I don't want to, but it's because we have completely different sets of experiences. Because usually when you talk to people, you're sharing your normal experiences, and the conversation becomes easier when you have the same set of experiences that you're sharing. You understand what I mean, right? So when sometimes not having the same set of experiences doesn't allow you to integrate, if you like. And so it's very important sometimes to even venture out and try and do the things that you would not normally do, and try and expand your limits of experiences, the sort of things that you do. I've called that matching majorities experiences to facilitate integration. So sometimes, you know, for instance, we tend to do certain things, and we tend to do things our way and in our own little groups, you know. Probably the only time we tend to integrate is when we go to work, but you have predominantly Black churches, predominantly Black communities, predominantly Black this, predominantly Black that. And therefore, we tend to have our own little experiences that are very different to the experience of everybody else. And as a result, that hinders our ability to interact. So I think it's important sometimes to come out of that comfort zone and venture into these other experiences, and also invite the others and to kind of to share in our experiences, and not worry too much whether that will be perceived positively or negatively, because yes, sometimes it might be perceived negatively, but overall the advantages massively outweighs the disadvantages. That's the end of my presentation, and yeah, so without further ado, let me stop share and get back to our presentation. So yeah, let me, do we have, right, so yeah, so I think it's time we can go for our next speaker, who is Betty Mungai. Is Betty around?
Yeah, Betty's around.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, Betty. Hi, Betty.
Yeah,
Betty. Yeah, that's good. Let me just give a little introduction about Betty. I met Betty a long while back, actually, and about in a slightly different context. And then I met her in Cecily's meetings, and she did one fantastic presentation. And I was like, I've got to get this lady into one of our presentations, because she was so good, and her eloquence and the way she presented and the substance of what she brought was absolutely fantastic. Betty is a singer-songwriter. She's a public speaker, and she's vested with the mission to help others develop the sense of meaning and live a vibrant life, basically, beyond trauma and setbacks. And I believe she has a lot to share. And without further ado, the floor is yours, Betty.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, it's a really an honor to be here. I'm really sorry about the dodgy lighting. I'm actually in the studio. I was doing a bit of recording, and then I had to come for your meeting. So
Awesome.
my slot at the studio was booked like way before. We normally have like a recurring session, so I thought I'll just do it. So if you can't see me properly, I do apologize. Yeah, I hope you can see me okay, but mostly I hope you can hear me as well. Yeah, so as Charles said, I'm a singer-songwriter, and I love speaking as well. I love speaking about different things. I'm very passionate about identity, about resilience, about well-being, yeah, those types of things, especially identity, because I think they feed into all these things, and so I try and capture that into my music. I normally have conversations with my friends about these types of things, and it's all good stuff. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation in terms of like what the racial and social injustices that have been going on recently. Well, they've been just more exposed now, not that they've not been going on, but and what that looks like for us, and how we can be resilient, and how we can move forward, and also teach our kids better, so then they have that sense of resilience as well, and a sense of identity, knowing who they are, and so they can be able to contribute to society in a massive way, knowing who they are, despite what's thrown at them, or despite what the environment is, etc. So just earlier on this week, there's a friend of mine whose younger sister, she's quite a new artist, and like she does like drill, which is some type of rap music here in the UK, if you guys are not familiar with it. So she was featured on BBC Three, and she's actually really talented. And she was saying that her goal is to not just be good for a female, she wants to be good. She wants to like compete with the elites. She wants to be world class. She wants to, she wants to be right up there with the likes of, like, I don't know, Stormzy um or who else, or maybe Coldplay. They don't do drill, but you get the idea. So they so she was saying that she wants to be right up there with the best. And what was really interesting, oh, also, Charles, sorry, how long do I have, so then I don't ramble away for too long? Sorry, I think you're still muted.
You have 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, love Zoom. You always forget that you're muted. So yeah, so she was saying that she wants to compete with the best. She wants to be up there with the world class. She just doesn't want to be good for a female. And also, she's black, actually. So she was from Liverpool. So this was before, they had the lockdown, and they took onto the streets, and just to have one final celebration, because before everyone was confined to their houses. But so she was saying that she wants to be world class. And so she went ahead and explained that, that she was brought up in a certain area of Liverpool, and then they moved to another area of Liverpool that was predominantly British and white, and like she was saying some of the struggles that they faced when they were there. So she was saying they couldn't park their car on the street or on the driveway because it would get vandalized. So then in the end had to move to another area of Liverpool. They had to move back to where they had come from, basically. And she just put it down to, she said, this were her words exactly. She said, I'm not saying that they're racist or anything. Maybe they just weren't that knowledgeable about, maybe just other cultures or other people. And so what I'm driving at is, I'm not denying that that the struggles that we face as Black people, they're definitely there, and the need for us to like excel and like do way more than others need to do, in order for us to be like a step ahead, for the need for us to be way much better and ahead of our game, so then we can be able to win or even just compete on the same level, to be honest. And so this girl, she's recording. She's about 16 years old now, and she's signed to a label and everything, and so that's just a good example of somebody who has like, at a very young age, she's been taught to defy the odds. She's been taught to she's not looking at, oh, but they were racist to me, they were, these people were vandalizing our vehicle when we parked it outside. I better not try singing, I better not try the music industry, because at the end of the day, I'm a young Black person, I'm a young Black woman. First of all, that's an industry that's really male dominated. So what I was going to talk about today, I'll summarize it as identity, self-awareness, and being able to think for ourselves. And so starting off with identity. So if you could agree, our identity is mostly shaped by our belief system. So our belief system has a lot to do with like how we were brought up. For example, like a lot of people here in Britain, they normally have like the dinner, I don't know, like at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. So then you're supposed to get together at 7 o'clock and have dinner together. And that's just kind of standard across the board for most homes. They get together and they sit on the dinner table and you eat together, and then you probably talk about the day, etc. And it's great because then you tend to have that family time. And so back in Africa, where I'm from, I'm Kenyan. So we had a similar thing, although it wasn't a set time. We just got together in the kitchen where we would cook together, and then would sit, not particularly at a dinner table. We didn't have a dinner table, actually. So we would sit somewhere, and we would share a meal. And similarly, we'll talk about our day, and we'll talk about different stuff and maybe our plans for the next day, and so on and so forth. And so belief system, based on how I've been brought up, I've been brought up believing that family is really, really important, that getting together and sharing meals is really important. And that's where those types of important conversations are brought up. Where my dad will say, you know, I want to buy this plot of land, and my mom will say such and such, and so on and so forth. And so even when we moved to the UK, that has been very typical. So whenever my dad wants to talk about something significant, or even not something so significant, if he just wants to have a conversation full stop, he will summon me and say, could you come over to the house on such and such a date at a certain time so we can talk about XYZ? Or he doesn't necessarily have to tell me what it is. So long as he calls me, I know what, you know, he wants to have a conversation, and so we'll go ahead and do that. And of course there will be food involved. So basically what I'm trying to say is, as much as we're different racially, we're not all that different in terms of how we operate as human beings. And so our belief system has mostly been reinforced by what we see around us, like what Charles was saying, like, you know, if you're an area where you live in an area where it's predominantly white, or it's predominantly black, if you're the opposite of that race, then you tend to stick out like a sore thumb. And depending on how nice the neighborhood is, then you tend to feel welcomed or otherwise. And so like in an attempt to like shape our identity and to shape the identity of our kids, I think it's really important for us to cross those barriers. I remember very, very well, like during lockdown, where I live in London, there's two of my neighbors. They're both actually, the neighbors on this side are from Romania, and the neighbors on the other side are British. And so during lockdown, there isn't a lot to do, and the sun was out and everyone was enjoying themselves. And so there was also the need to like, some people were doing some barbecues. I mean, the neighbors were doing the barbecues, and we shared the barbecue over the fence. And so this took like one of us like breaking that barrier of you know, saying hello, maybe for instance, and like you know, saying how you're finding lockdown, etc., instead of like shelling away. So as much as the more our children see us crossing those barriers and interacting with people who don't look like us, because it's just human nature to strike that conversation and ask the right questions. Oh yeah, we have a dinner at 6 o'clock. Oh yeah, we have pasta, while you know, I have ugali. Ugali is made of cornmeal. And maybe I'll invite them over to try some cornmeal. So we exchanged food over the fence, which was great. And I got to learn quite a bit about them. So for example, if I had kids, they would see this type of interaction. Then maybe they would learn a bit more about their kids as well. They'll learn a bit about Romanians, and they would also see actually, they're not that strange. They're human beings as well. We have some cultural exchanges as well, some things that are quite similar, and be able to bond over that. And as much as you know, the other things that are the news as well that are showing these social injustices that are going on, what they see at home really shapes what they think about people who don't necessarily speak like them or look like them. I would also say about conditioning, actually going back to belief system, just going back to this story about this girl that has entered the music industry. So she must have a self-belief. So the way our belief system work is, we've been fed some information through the way we've been brought up, and then we think a certain way about what we can do or what we can't do. So for example, some of those might be quite false. They might be completely ungrounded and untrue. Most of them are beliefs that are limiting us from achieving our potential, for example. And so when we see things like that on the news, or we see, or we receive a racist interaction. I've had one of those before, but not many, honestly. Like most of the interactions I've had have been quite pleasant, and mostly it's because I chose to assume the best about the other person first. Assume the best about this other human being who I'm interacting with, in the sense that they're also a human being. And although they're quite different from me, they look quite different from me, I would also like to know like what's different about them. I would like to learn about them, I suppose. And so our belief system can really limit that type of interaction, and we don't tend to believe the best about people. And then also, I think I covered the environment in that as well. So yeah, we've spoken about that already. So self-awareness as well. So building up our kids to say, okay, so and so. Actually, another example. The other day I was baking a banana cake. Actually, I'm one of those people who took up baking during lockdown. And so I decided I'm going to start learning how to bake different things. And actually, I'm doing all right. I'm doing fine. It's a shame, you know, if it was a meeting, I would have brought, if it was a physical meeting, maybe I would have brought some, but there you go. Maybe sometime. Charles, I'll send you one through the post. Yeah, so.
I was going to say that actually, yeah. I'll send you you know my address, so you'll do that.
Yeah, anyone else who would like my banana cake, just drop it in the chat. I'll send it to you. I'll try to. Hope it gets there in one piece. So I learned how to make banana cake, and I remember just the other week, 2 weeks ago, I was baking a banana cake. I was due to come to Reading for just to visit my family, and yes, I'll make you guys banana cake. Why not? So our oven broke down. It didn't actually break down. I think I touched the child lock thing, and then it stopped working, and I thought it had broken down. So here I am. I have a half-baked cake. I need to leave in an hour, and I was like, I've gone through all this trouble to make this cake. Surely I'm not just gonna leave it. So I knocked on the other neighbor's door. You know, they're a mixture of, I think, a lady. I think she's, well, she looks Oriental, so I'm not sure where exactly she's from. But the husband is British, and they've got 2 lovely little kids. So we had some interaction over the fence during lockdown. So I went over and had a knock on the door and asked them, "Can I use your oven? Because ours has just broken down." And they were like, "Yeah, sure, come in." And it's just interesting because of the relationships we've been able to build during lockdown. They weren't necessarily, we didn't talk a lot, but because we broke that ice, even though it's COVID, we didn't break rules, even though it's COVID, and like there's that lack of, people have been really craving human interaction because everybody has been by themselves. We're able to cross those barriers and, like, you know, just help each other out whenever. And then similarly, my neighbors next door, they locked themselves out, and they're like, "Oh yeah, can we come over and climb through the fence so then we can get over to the house?" So these are some of the things that can sprout out of, you know, interactions, and not going with a preconceived idea about who the other person is, or what they're about, or what they think of you, because that's naturally, which is a shame, naturally our minds tend to gravitate and be very self-conscious and think the worst of the other person, and that is based on what is fed to us. So, and on that note, I'll talk about being able to think for ourselves and teaching our kids to do that a lot and to question. I was brought up in Kenya, and my educational system was in Kenya as well. So the way we were brought up and the way my schooling was, it was, I will feed you the information and you're not allowed to ask a question. You're just allowed to nod and just accept what it is that I say. So the idea of challenging someone and asking a question, drop it in the chat if you agree. If you have a similar experience, drop it in the chat. I want to see it. Also tell me where you did your schooling from. It was, so the schooling wasn't all bad, but I'm just saying there wasn't that culture of questioning and asking, but why do we do this? Or why don't you do it like this? But how come that is the case? But what about this? But have we considered this? Which is always the case. And then obviously when I came here, it was a totally different culture. And I was like, whoa. And I was like in my, I was about 17, 18, and I was going off to uni. And I'm not used to asking questions. And of course, you can appreciate how challenging that is. And of course, now afterwards, I'm supposed to go into the workplace where even there, more than ever, I'm supposed to think for myself, take my own initiative. I'd put it on my CV that I can take my own initiative, by the way. Anybody else done that? Put it on your CV that you can take your own initiative when you couldn't quite take your own initiative. Right? As a graduate, I had to learn, right? Maggie, I see that. It's crazy. So it's really important for us to be able to think for ourselves and teach our kids to do the same. So like, there's something I was reading here. So think for yourself. What's in the news are problems other people have decided you should know about, which is very true. Okay. there are other problems that other people have decided that we should know about. Yes, there are problems and they're existing, especially what's going on right now in Nigeria. If there are any Nigerians on here, guys, I've been praying for you for real. And I hope the situation gets better. And it's been such a huge, great awakening for Africa in general as well. I think a lot of things are going to change out of what is happening in Nigeria. So my prayers are with you guys for real. And what's in the news is not an accurate depiction of life. Sometimes it can be, some depending on the news. Obviously what's happening in Nigeria is true. But sometimes, of course, you know about propaganda and politics and how politicians can play. And even like right now, news anchors, they're quite biased, and sometimes they can sway in left or right depending on who they want to favor. And their reporting is not quite unbiased, so to speak. So the news that we receive, which again reinforces our beliefs about who we are as a people, as Black people, as white people, or how we see the other races, is reinforced even more, right? So what's on your screen are words and pictures precisely chosen to influence your thoughts. This goes on social media as well. Your actions, your beliefs, your feelings, your values. And in that realm, what happens to be choices are just slightly different pathways to the same outcome. So it's up to us to filter and think, okay, I think this is complete rubbish. Or for us to think, okay, how come that is the case? Or just think for ourselves, like, you know, is that actually true? Do I need to share that? Actually, we have a lot of, you know, there's that tendency to share. There's always a share button on every social media platform, right? So this, oh, there's a lovely meme. I love memes. I'm that person who'll be sharing memes. I mean, I don't share a lot of memes, but I do share the funny ones that I can relate to. But there's a tendency to share and share and share. But sometimes it's good for us to stop and think, is this actually true? Or is it just like, and being able to question what is being fed to us through the media. So information is a tool that can be used, that you can use to your own great benefit, and to the benefit of many others. Yet the power of information can also be used against you. This doesn't mean that you have to be cynical, which is what we're trying to reinforce here. We're trying to reinforce positive mindsets about other people, positive mindsets about what's going on, because that's the only way we can move forward. That's the only way we can move to reconciliation. Information will empower you. Information that will empower you is the information you seek out and verify and work to understand at a fundamental level. Yeah, I think it's really key to teach our kids about what's happening, because I mean, like, I have a nephew right now. He's 4 months old, and like he can hold the milk bottle by himself at the moment. Well, it drops off from time to time, but like I wasn't able to do that at 5 years old. I exaggerate a bit, but what I'm trying to say is the kids nowadays like advance at a really fast rate, and like us cultivating that culture of asking why, and them understanding why things are the way they are, etc. Will be a bit difficult to. Trump will be a difficult one to explain to them, I suppose. Sorry, you know, is a fan, but what I'm trying to say is basically like being able to explain to them why certain things are the way they are, and being able to ask them questions. And I think we've done this as well before. People say that if you can be able to repeat back the information that I've said to you in your own words, then you basically understood what it is that I've said to you. So it says here, it's your job to transform information into wisdom, and wisdom in a rich and meaningful life. Your very own positive possibilities are too immaculate to outsource that job to anyone else. So yeah, so just being able to think for ourselves, and encouraging that to our kids, encouraging that to our families. It goes back to building our belief system, building our sense of identity, building you know, how we treat people, building our self-awareness, and also we might even be able to find out, okay, maybe even I'm a bit racist. I don't know. Why did I say what I said? You know, this person just walked past me. Why did I think the way I thought about them? They haven't said a word to me, but then I have this preconceived idea about them. So I think those are the three things that we can really tackle in my opinion, to really break down the barriers of racism and prejudice. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Betty. That was really spot on. There are quite a lot of points in there to ponder. But I think it's very positive, because I think it's very important for us to look at this in a really positive way, the issue of racism, because unfortunately every time this conversation comes, it brings a lot of negative vibe to it, a lot of pain, and a very justified pain at that, and a lot of you know what I mean. And therefore, that all, unfortunately, emotions don't choose. If you're filled with negative emotions, they will affect you negatively all the time, and therefore it doesn't matter what the cause of those negative emotions are. And therefore it's very important, as Betty has put it, that it's important to channel the conversation to bring that positive emotions in the way we approach this thing, and therefore focusing on how can we change, improve ourselves. And I really like the point of media, of the mainstream media, that you know, you can't trust them, because they have their own agenda. Sometimes their agenda coincides with ours, but that is not a guarantee that the information that you get from them will be accurate, and even if it's accurate, whether it will be helpful. Because sometimes the information may be accurate, but it may not be helpful, you know. And therefore it's very important and I think that speaks to the importance of us having these sort of conversations, these sort of platforms, these sort of spaces where we can kind of sit amongst ourselves and say, right, this is where we are, this is the situation we find ourselves in. How do we get ourselves out of it? Leave everything out there, you know what I mean? Leave the movements, the activism, and everything that we are very much passionate about and very much involved and very much emotionally charged about. Don't get me wrong, I can be an activist. I am very passionate about social justice. But then every now and again, I have to sort of check and say, right, I'm doing that, yes, but am I doing enough in my current circumstance to get myself out of the troubles I am in? Yes, partly, and for a big chunk of it, it's because of the problems that are out there, the structural problems, yes. But if there is something I can do, then surely it is my responsibility to do. So taking that responsibility is really important. Thank you so much, Betty, for your time and your contribution. If you have any question for Betty, I encourage you, please put it down in the questions. And then at the end, after the second speaker, we're going to have a fantastic time to have a little discussion. Let me apologize, guys. The plan was to finish at 5, but it seems like we're spending more time. I think I got too carried away and very passionate at the beginning, and I kept talking, and then I took too much time. I'm going to invite Maggie to do her bit, but if you can stay with us till the end, I will really appreciate it. I'm sure it will be worth your time. We might finish a bit later than planned. Probably we might go till 1/4 or 5:20. We'll try and squeeze in as much as possible and really quickly as possible. But without wasting any more time, Maggie is our next speaker. Maggie Banjo, like I said before, she's a fantastic speaker. She's a passionate social justice what's the word, activist, if you like. Activist, if you like. Yeah, and currently she's worked with lots of international development projects and programs both in the UK and abroad, but currently she works with UNICEF as a child protection specialist. And so yeah, it's such an honor that we have her with us. I asked her to come and join us and talk about this, and she was like, absolutely, because she loves these sort of conversations and these sort of spaces and this sort of engagement, because that's a passion. So without wasting further ado, I would like to invite Maggie. Maggie, the floor is yours. Please share with us what you have.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can I just, my device is really bad in terms of the microphone. I see you nodding, so I'm going to say that's okay. If you can't hear me, just let me know. I do have a microphone on the side here. Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, on top of working for UNICEF, I also have to say that I'm a recent mother of twin boys, and so there's chaos behind me, and a very loving husband and dad is sort of hovering in the background. So if you see that, it's just me living out my life very authentically. So I didn't even, clean up and everything. So all in its full glory there. And the guitar for, I think Betty, you're the one who mentioned it. That's my husband as well. He dabbles in music. So yeah, just to kick off, I know we're running short of time. I want to just preamble this to say that my talk really is going to look at, of course, bearing witness to the fact that there is structural racism. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but really looking at our day-to-day experiences, like Charles has said, and see how we can sort of navigate this. And also just echoing what the other speaker said, I am not going to speak on behalf of all of the 54 nations of Africa, because that is not an experience I have. I'll speak for myself, but I am very sure that we can draw parallels to our own experiences. I'll also be looking down, because whereas before I could just speak off the top of my head, since maternity leave, that is no longer the case, because I am very much sleep deprived. This is a lot of makeup. And my experience as well working for the international development sector is I'm very passionate. Everybody is social justice. It's a word that we've heard on this talk, but I'm specifically interested in the intersection between child protection and gender. And on top of that, I am dyslexic as well. So I kind of come at this from very different angles. So as a Black woman working in international development, which is very much a white sector, very represented by white people on both sides of the hemisphere, and also being dyslexic, I find that the issue of diversity really tugs on my heartstrings, because I have to navigate that on a daily basis. So what I've done in this talk, and I think I'll be done in 10 minutes, it shouldn't take that long. I have 5 points which I think are quite important to sort of bear in mind as you go through a recruitment journey, as you go through, going through the recruitment journey and your careers and sort of moving on and up and up and up. So that's the preamble. I don't know whether Charles has this. I wanted us to sort of do a poll. If you could kindly indulge me by looking at a spectrum of pragmatism. So on one end, you have pragmatism, and pragmatism is very much looking at, here I am Maggie, I have bills to pay. The fact that I am Black, a woman, really doesn't quite feature in this decision I'm about to make right now, but, I am going to take that promotion. I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to, that's what's driving me. Pragmatism, my kids need to go to school, bills to pay. You have, if that is you, like that fully embodies you, then you're towards one. But if you are more leaning towards authenticity, and what I mean by authenticity is really looking at your true self and thinking.
Sorry to interrupt, Maggie. I think I got it the other way around. I think I've put authenticity on the one spectrum and pragmatism on the 10.
Okay, so it still counts. So this time authenticity is on the one. So if you're like your true authentic self, you're someone who's like, you know what, I'm working for this organization. I want them to see me as a Black person. Yes, so thank you for that, Charles. I've seen it come up. So yeah, one, authenticity. I'm a Black person. I want them to see me as a Black person. I want the policies to reflect who I am. And if, let's say, I'm working in a city like London, which is about 17% ethnic minority, I want to make sure that the organization that I'm working for represents those numbers, So you're like at the one. If you're somewhere in between where you're like, you know what, yes, sorry, I don't know whether my screen shut down there, but yes, I am Black, but I also need to pay bills. I kind of get why I need to feel represented, but at the same time, I also get that, there's a pragmatic side to me. Now, the caveat here is I don't want anybody to vote 5. You cannot vote 5. You have to vote either 1 to 4 or 6 to 10. Does that make sense? Because the reason I say no 5 is because I want you to really think about it and not just take the middle ground, because I think the middle ground can be a bit, like, okay, I'm not going to make a decision here. So I'll give you, I won't influence where I am. So I will vote to say where I am. And then we can sort of start looking to see where everybody is. Yeah. So if you need me to repeat that, just type in the comment box, then we'll come back to this. So And as I'm going through the 5 points that I think we sort of need to look at when we're going through these career journeys and experiencing racial inequality and acknowledging that there's structural racism, just have this in mind. You know, when something comes up, you're like, am I a very authentic person? Am I a one where I will not work for any organization that does not have a diversity policy? That's not it. I'm a Black person. In fact, I want you to address me by my name, which has 7 syllables and is from Malawi. And even if it's unpronounceable, I'm not going to give you an out and say, oh, just call me Fred. I want you to use my name. That's the authentic side. The pragmatic side, I'm repeating because someone has asked me to repeat. The pragmatic side is, you know what? Call me Fred. I'm here for a paycheck. Really don't care what you think about my race, et cetera, et cetera. So again, keep coming back to me, and I can keep explaining, and I'll revisit this. So I've got 5 points that it's not a comprehensive list, but for the sake of time, that I think, especially as a Black woman with dyslexia, I sort of had to come to terms with understanding that, you know, I'm a minority and I wanted to get ahead in my career. These are certain things that I needed. These are some home truths that work for me, and hopefully they can translate into your life. The first thing I'm going to say is time. Time is a very interesting concept for me. I know it's cliche to say that, oh, you know, put in the work. Everybody says that, but you do have to put in the work. The way I look at it, we have 24 hours in the day, right? Like one day, just if you're struggling with something, one thing I do is like today I was having a conversation with my husband, and like I said, we have kids, and we're like, hey, you know what? The kids have come and they take up a huge, you know, a portion of our time. And so we were thinking then, what needs to go? Is it Netflix? Is it what are we doing that needs to go so that we can start making time for ourselves? And I think it's a little bit like that with our careers as well. Understanding that structurally we are at a disadvantage, and everybody has said you need to work twice as hard. Where's that time going to come from? If you're working twice as hard, you cannot be doing the same things that perhaps your white counterparts are doing. If you need to put in the time, what sacrifices you need to be making? You know, whether it's I don't know, spending, like I said, less time on Netflix, or spending less time doing your hair. You know, those braids take 8 hours. You know, could you go for a simpler style? And then with time, it accumulates, but you have to put in the time and being diligent with your time, appreciating that, you know, as a Black community, as a BAME community, speaking as a diaspora, there's also the double burden that we are less likely to have extended family, you know? So that means that you have to almost, there are no shortcuts, you know? You can't be like, you know what, I'm gonna move in with my parents because I need to work out this new thing here, and I'll have the advantage of maybe people pulling in together. No, you already may perhaps need to work already to keep up your overheads. There are all these tugs that are coming at you. So really reconcile your time. Where are you spending your time, and where do you need to do an audit about? If you have to work twice as hard, where's that time coming from? And so that's the first point. The second point for me is resources. When I was at university, I tried not to buy a Microsoft license. No. If someone had a key going, I was in there like, dude, my license was valid. I need to do this, right? But it's the same thing. Where your heart is the saying, something like where your heart is, there also is something. Basically saying that where you spend your time, where your heart is, where your time is, that's where your heart is too. Where you spend your time and your resources, you know? Are you going to spend your time, and this is, I'm not degrading and I'm not shaming anyone who perhaps has vocational activities, because like Charles said, we need to also develop other vocational things like soft skills, but are you investing time in your craft? You know, not just time, but your resources in your craft. Are you spending time saying, okay, you know what, actually, instead of Spotify subscription, I'm gonna buy a subscription for Coursera, because with Coursera, I am gonna get this XYZ. Because like I said, you need to work twice as hard. You need to get ahead of the margins. Just to be seen, you need to be extra. It's unfair, but it's the truth that we're working on right now, right? So what is that? What are the resources that you need to do? you know, if you can't afford the Microsoft license, can you do Google Docs? Like, do you know how Google Docs works? And how can you upskill in that level? I think there are so many things that are at our fingertips that if we just look around and see how you can tweak certain things, it gives you that added advantage. I heard once that like when athletes like Usain Bolt, for instance, they get to a point where they run and they're really fast. Like on their own, this is as far as they can go. But where the elitism, is it elitism? Professional elite? Okay. Where like the professionalism comes through is they start tweaking those 10 seconds. You know, they get Nike to do something with their shoes. You know, they wear that fabric that gives them that breeze. You know, those tweaks. That's not to say that they didn't get to that 90% themselves. But how do you get that 91, 92, 93? How do you start kissing that 100? And part of that is looking at you've looked at your time, you've done an audit, you said, actually, you know what? I could spend less time. Maybe when I get to a particular place, if I'm going to see my friends, I'm dedicating my Saturdays to my craft. Sundays is when I do social. Like I'm not spending my whole weekend doing X, Y, Z. So you've audited your time. Now you're looking at your resources and auditing your resources. What am I spending my money on? Can I afford to? If you can afford to spend money on that, that's fine. But if you do not have time to spend money on your craft, then again, go back to your resources. Like, what am I spending that time on? How do I need to get past that 90 and start moving into excellence, basically? And another challenge that would come under resources is black tax. If I could just get a thumbs up with who knows what black tax is. I don't know whether I can see it. Maybe it'll be Charles who'll be able to see that. Do we know what black tax is? I don't know. Okay, I really can't see who said yes or no, but I'm just gonna explain it anyway. So black tax, again, a challenge that perhaps comes from diaspora. I know of it from my experience, is that even when I started learning, the money was not my own. Right? If you come from a faith background, already you have 10%. That's not what black tax is. Black tax is the realization that if you were raised by a village, it's time to start giving back to the village. You know, you started earning your money. Globalization means a lot of families back home are perhaps not in the same financial situation that you know they started off with, et cetera, et cetera. And so sometimes you need to send money back home. So whereas perhaps your white counterpart may have the resources with them to be able to go out, to do this, that, and the other, bearing in mind they also have a network of families, you also have the burden of black tax in that it's just not your own resources. So when you're doing that auditing of your resources, knowing what your challenges are and working to those challenges. Again, remember, you've come 90%. We're just talking about that last final mile, like how do we get that advantage? So you've done all this, you've audited your time, you've got your resources, and at this point, you've been called for an interview. And you're like, great, I'm in the door now. How do I do this? What can I do to sort of understand what this organization is about? I call this organizational intelligence, organizational EQ. Basically, what you want to know is, okay, so I've done all this. I know who I am. I know what the structural challenges are. What I do not need, however, depending on where you are on the pragmatism and the simplicity scale, is I don't want to go to work every day. If you're about your true authentic self, that is, you don't want to go to work every day and feel like, oh my God, that person said this again, all this, and there's no system of like airing out your grievances. If you're on the more pragmatic side, you might be like, you know what, I'm only here for 2 years. I need to, you know, it's a job. I get paid. They pay me a lot of money, and I'm not about that activism life, you know? And I don't think either is bad. We know everybody's in the grind together and you're just doing what you need to do. But it's important that you understand who you're getting into contract with at the beginning, because the frustration sometimes can come if you go into jobs, they're not who you thought they were. Maybe because you didn't do your own research or you're not able to find that information. And then afterwards, you're like, I need to change jobs. So now you're back to auditing your time and your resources so that you can get back to this point, right? So what are you looking out for? Organizational EQ. How diverse is the panel that is interviewing you? If you're there and it's only 2 white men, here your flag is going up. You're like, okay, so I know that you just generally and statistically are more likely to get a job anyway. I want to know how inclusive this organization is at reaching out to people in the fringes, and you are not the fringes. So you ask questions about that. Like, okay, it's really great. Thank you for the interview. You know, you may put on your professional English and be like, hello, blah, blah, blah. It's up to you. Nobody's shaming you. But ask those questions. Okay, so do you have a diversity policy? How do you deal with grievances? How diverse is your leadership? You can go online as well. At the moment, it's mandatory that organizations reveal their gender pay gap. So women, you can go out there just to see what the gender pay gap is. And these are things that will be indicators about the intelligence of that organization. Some sectors like IT, for instance, where my husband works, then they don't like, there's issues around how inclusive women are included in the organization. So that may not quite work always. But again, like I said, if you've done this audit before, it helps like with the day-to-day, like this being like, oh, you know what, this, I knew this coming in. There's something about owning that decision before you go in. So yeah, so that's your organization EQ. You've done your research. This is what you know. And if you're really like, you know what, you know, I'm not sure that this is the right fit for me. Like if it really matters to you that you're heard and people call you by your name, as hard as it is to pronounce, and nobody's gonna ask you to say, hey, you know, I know your name is, you know, Anessa, but can I call you Tina because I find Anessa quite hard? You're like, no, you can't call me Tina. You know, if that really matters to you, if they're gonna call you Tina, then have that conversation with yourself before you get in and say, okay, fine, where, you know, are they likely to promote me if I put in my good work? Is this gonna frustrate me? Then maybe I need to invest in an organization that will see me and value who I am. The fourth and penultimate point is your network. Charles has touched on this about being, you know, just knowing the people around you. So for me, network is really important. So I didn't grow up in the UK. I came here when I was 16. I worked with various youth charities here. And I tell you the truth, like sometimes conversations happened and I was like, I have no idea what TV show. Yes, Paul, yes. In certain circles, yes, people with long names have been asked to say, can I just call you XYZ? Sorry, Paul wrote something there, so I was just replying to that. So network and being relatable. And again, if on the authenticity scale, you may be like, why must I be the one to know what the majority are listening to or what shows they're watching? Why? You know, I watch, I don't know, what's that word? Big Brother Africa. They don't watch Big Brother Africa. They have this whole internal dialogue. But I think this is the burden of being, you know, a majority minority spectrum, right? Like sometimes you just be relatable. And why do I say this? It's not so much that you're not being your authentic self and you're lying that you love Love Island. And there's various ways that you can, There's various ways that you can slice this, basically. I don't like Love Island, but there was a time the people I was working with, the teams I was working with, were into Love Island. And I need to influence this group of people. I need to influence them. I need to just have people like working with people they like. That's the bottom line. Like you don't go to work and think, oh God, Charles and his opinion, I'm gonna have to work with him again. You know what I mean? Like those are not situations you look forward to. You look forward to, oh my God, yeah, Charles, yes, we're different, but we're able to have conversations even within our differences. And part of that is being relatable. So if someone loves Love Island and you know that we need to influence them, what I learned from me is not so much that I'm gonna watch Love Island, but when they talk about Love Island, I am genuinely interested. I'm asking them, why do you like it? You know, I don't particularly like that, whether it's a gender thing, whether it's the lighting or whatever. You can have a conversation around that. That doesn't mean that you give up your authenticity or your values, whatever you think of Love Island. I have no thoughts about Love Island. It's just, you know, something, that came to mind. But it's just an example I'm using because it's common. So you've got that. So building a network is about how can you relate to the people you're in your network with, people you're trying to influence, people who are trying to influence you, and so you can move ahead. A lot of people, like we mentioned, that interview, if you're going for a job or a promotion, sometimes it's less about your hardcore skills. It's very much also to do with how they can relate to you. They're like, you know what, is this a guy I'm able to do overtime with? Like if rubber hits the road, is this the person that I'm able to go and call? And if it's hard for them to, if it's hard for people to relate to you, I don't like the word them, people to relate to you, it's harder to, to move certain things along. And yes, is that structural racism? I don't have the answer right now. But what I do know is that if you start building your networks and you're more relatable or you're interested, it's hard to have adverse feelings of someone Brené Brown put it really closely. He says, when we're dealing with hate and polarization, lean in, How many people have you had the first impression you had of them? You're like, this guy. But you move in and you get to know them, you realize that, oh, you are a sulky person because you're going through X, Y, Z in your life. And all of a sudden, it's so much easier to empathize and meet them at the level that they're at. And you're like, okay, I get you now, And that's what networking is about. It's about making sure that people see the you. They don't see the unconscious biases that they've carried their whole life. They don't see that. They see you. They see Maggie, the person with a husband and twins and goes to church and yada yada, and they can relate to you on that level as opposed to, just thinking, oh yeah, the Black woman from Malawi, the one with the scarves, now they know you as a person, right? On a more practical level, I would say things like knowing your meetup, what groups exist within your professionalism, are they bodies that you can sign up to? All those things really help your CV stand out as well. So if you've already started making friends and you can make those connections, that's really great. My final point, is lifestyle trap. Now this one is slightly convoluted. If you're at the early part of your career or you're thinking of making a career move, watching your overhead, right? Again, diaspora, Black community, you may not have the support structure around you. You may not have the network around you to help you with childcare as you pursue a certain career trajectory or a promotion and all those kind of things. It's really important that auditing your time and your resources, you also audit your finances, obviously, but looking at your overhead, because sometimes if, for instance, your lifestyle is locked into a 10,000 pound bill, like at the end of the year, your bills are 10,000 pounds, for instance. But to make that career change, you're going to get paid 7,500 pounds. The chances of you then making a switch into another career are harder because you've locked yourself in to this thing. And this is really a trap that you can get into at the early part of your career, where you're like, oh my God, if I go and work for a certain restaurant at this wage, this many hours, I'll get this. You buy a car, then you start going on holidays, and then a permanent role in your children and career turns up. They're paying you a salary, yes, and there's career progression, yes, but there's no way for you to make that switch, because all of a sudden, how are you going to service this car? How are you going to service this lifestyle that you've amassed? So again, I would say that when you're coming from a background where you don't have a social network, where you're marginalized or where you're in the fringes, and it's harder for you to draw on your network, it's really important on an individual level to understand what your overheads are, especially if you're about to make that change. So those are my 5 points. Look at your time, audit your time, look at your resources. When you get that interview, what is the organizational EQ? Does that fit right with you? It doesn't matter. If you're a money person and you want to get the job, just get the job. If you're about the values and your authenticity doesn't own that decision, if that's where you're at, it's cool, it's fine. Your network, make sure that you're relatable. It's easier to influence people when you can relate to them or they can relate to you. And watch out for that lifestyle trap. If you're about to make a move into a career or another trajectory, make sure that you're not accumulating overheads that will not allow you to be flexible. And just finally, being Black in the UK, facing structural racism is very tiring. If you are into activism, that's also very tiring. Take care of yourself. The fatigue is real. And find friends. Yeah, thank you so much. That's it for me. I don't know how much time I took there, but yeah.
Wow, that was perfect, Maggie. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was very enlightening. I was very excited. There are a few bits that I almost jumped off my seat because I thought, wow, this is really practical. This is something I can start using tomorrow, if
Yeah.
not today. Thank you so much. I know you're really busy. Like you said
No, it's
yourself,
fine.
you're a
It's a
self-professed,
pleasure to be here.
deprived, but you took time to come to and share with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This whole spectrum of authenticity versus pragmatism, I find it really insightful, because throughout your presentation, I was kind of, in each point that you were saying, I was kind of measuring myself where I fall into this category. And I think it's very useful. And probably from now on, I'll be using that as a measure of how to approach things. Like you said, it's not whether being one side or the other is right or wrong. It isn't. It's just the fact that you need to know where you are, because that will determine how you would approach things, and therefore your level of effectiveness can rely on that eventually. So thank you so much for that. Guys, thank you. You've spent so much time with us. We've gone way past our time, but it would be criminal if we do not allow for any questions. If someone has any question or a burning contribution before we go. So if there is anyone with it, I didn't see any question in the chat section. I was trying to keep an eye there. I didn't see any. But if there is anyone with a question or any contribution, something you want to say, I'll welcome you right now. Just unmute yourself and ask a question, or say your comment, and then we can take it from there. I'll allow a few minutes, about 5 minutes, to have that bit of conversation, and then we'll wind up. You're welcome. Anybody with a question or a contribution? Just unmute yourself, and then you can speak so we can hear you. I see people scratching their heads. Is it that they're thinking of questions or thinking of how to contribute?
I have a comment, and
yeah, go on.
Very personal marketing here. Speaking of networks, if anybody wants to link up with me, I'll put my Twitter handle in the chat.
That's amazing.
And we can conversation offline.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Maggie. Stephen,
well, for me, it's just really to thank the speaker, really, the last speaker and the first speaker for their time and sharing.
Sorry to interfere with you, Steve. Maggie.
Yeah.
Did you want to share the poll, because we didn't share it? 8 people voted.
Oh yeah.
We didn't get to share that. Should I end it? And because I left it to keep going.
Yeah,
I didn't know what you wanted to do. Do you want me to share it?
Yes, please. I just want to. Yes, please share it. Just so
there it is.
People get a sense of.
There it is.
Where they are. Okay.
Yeah, can people see that?
Yeah. So it's about more people on the authentic side.
Actually, yeah, you have more people on the authentic side. And which shows that they're feels quite strongly about their values and who they are and everything on that side. And you've got a few on the other side. There you go. There you have it. That's where we are. Let me close that. Fantastic. But I think that is a fantastic tool, and I'll probably use it from here on. Thank you so much. Is there anybody with a question? Final chance. Steve, you were talking. I interrupted you. Sorry. Carry on. Steve, you're on mute, man. There you go.
Yes. Now, but yeah. Just to say, thank you very much. Well, I can say Sister Margaret, Sister Maggie. I don't want to edit your name. Trying to be precise.
All syllables, please. All syllables.
Trying to be precise. Well, as you have really shared with us, it's very nice. I really enjoyed your presentation, to be honest.
Thank you.
But again, I think we might have another time for a bit more, really. The last episode that we had was talking about how we can be a success in a marketplace, and working where you're working in an international organization, really, you're going to be something a little bit more. Let's put it plain. You're going to be a little bit something more for you to have, that acceptance and trust that, well, you can do this. So, you know, I do believe, you know, as you are in that position, really, you have, you know, learn and see how things work. And what I mean, you create a way of life to survive. For example, if you're living in jungle, well, the jungle makes you live in a certain way. If you go to Alaska, you're going to live in a certain way to survive, really. And then, well, you have to adapt, you know, have an adaptation. So if you can share a little bit in a nutshell, just for a minute, you know, how much you had to adjust to fit in, to accommodate, to accommodate the environment that you're in, if I can ask.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so thank you for that. And I'm quite humbled of your earlier conversation, that your earlier comment about, you know, there had to be something there. Actually, I'll be honest with you. So I'll take about 2 minutes. In my education career, I was not no, you know, those people who excel at school. So if you're alluding to like, and this is not to, let me preamble this to say that I'm not putting down God's creation here, but just to say that I didn't have the most obvious set of intellect, i.e., so when going to let's say UNICEF is who I think you're speaking about, it's not like I have anything special or XYZ. That I'm sure I'm special, but I don't think that there is like a, you know, 150 IQ. That's not where we're at, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is I'm dyslexic. And so for a whole part of my education career, I didn't know why I couldn't read. I didn't know why. I just found things hard to process. At the moment, my husband and I have something where if I write something or if I have an idea and it needs to leave, it needs to go somewhere, I ask him to proofread it because so that it lands in a particular way. All that to say that at the end, I said that please just own the decisions that you make. If you decide to go for a 7-syllable name to be introduced, that just own that, and people, eventually the people who are right for you will come around. Now, in terms of how I, let's say, proceeded, like let's say with UNICEF, for instance, it took a lot of sacrifice. When I talk about time and resources, this is not like, my sister was getting married in about July 2001, and an opportunity came for me to work in Liberia. The sacrifice there was speaking to my sister and telling her that, hey, you know that I have been working as a volunteer and an intern for Oxfam for 5 years, no pay, every Saturday, and I sacrificed that. It meant I sacrificed, you know, the shoes, the lifestyle that comes with getting a paycheck to be able to have a seat at the table. You know what I mean? And sometimes that opportunity doesn't always pay off. So I'm not saying that, you know, I'm a believer of God, and so therefore I know that, you know, He saw me in those moments. So when I talked about these 5 things that I picked, the things that I have used in my career and have paid off. So time meant that every Saturday I gave up the opportunity cost of working on a Saturday. Meant I didn't get any money on that Saturday. I couldn't pull a shift or an extra shift or whatever. I couldn't do that. My evenings were very much spent about researching my chosen sector and knowing how I get an advantage. I'm sure we all have experiences of working in international NGOs. It's a very white dominated space, you know, but then also coming there and thinking, why do I have that edge? My first interview, not with UNICEF, but the organization I went to work for in Liberia, they asked me and said, well, you don't look like the kind of person that would leave the UK to come to Liberia. I knew what the interviewer was saying. I am Black, and people expect a white person to be in those jeeps, you know, coming from the UK. We know that stereotype. So again, when we look at the pragmatism and authenticity scale, at very early career, I'll be honest, I think if you're in your early career, you're more likely to be pragmatic. You know, I was pragmatic. Let me just put it like that. I was just like, hey, brah, I don't care about your racism. Me, I need this experience. I've invested time in this. I'm coming. Whether or not you think I don't look like the person that you think I should look like, that's on you. You know, so I knew what the organizational EQ of when I went there. So when they continued with the very backward thinking ways, I wasn't offended. And so with that, with time, I have put these things into play. I worked on my network. I always have an opportunity, like I always give space to to network with people. So like even now, I'm like, hey, let's continue this conversation on Twitter, because you never know where those conversations come. And again, lifestyle trap, in the beginning, I had to be very aware, I'm still aware now, of what my overheads are. Can I afford to wear Gucci? No, I can't. If I need to be investing in Coursera, if I need to be investing in whatever, not that I could even afford it if I didn't, but you know what I mean? Those are the kind of conversations that I was having. So bringing it back to these points, these are the things that have worked for me. I don't think that there was like a magic pill. I just did this. Sorry, that was more than 2 minutes.
Wow, thank you very much. That's 101%. Thank you. More than what I've asked.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think you've summed it up really nicely there.
Yeah, thank you,
Maggie. And yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. Guys, it's actually 5:30 now. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us till now. I hope that the extra time was worth your time, and I believe it doesn't have to be the whole thing, because I mean this has been overkill. I can say we've talked about so many things, so many nuggets to take on. But if you can just take 1 point or 2 or 3 and incorporate that in your life and in your daily endeavor, I think it could be of use to you. So I'm hoping you've gotten something out of it. I've recorded this session. I will publish it and share with you guys the link in case you want to share it with your friends and other people, because the aim is to keep this conversation going. It's very important to have this conversation about race. It's not just a one day thing. I think sometimes when you say like, oh, this is a Black History Month, then we talk about issues of race, and then after this month we forget about it. That's not how it works, because these are things we deal with it day in, day out, each month, continuous for all around the year. So it's very important to keep this conversation going. So yeah, let's share it. Let's talk about it in our own spaces, in our own networks. Let's keep the conversation going, and eventually, by God's grace, we'll get somewhere. Having said that, thank you so much for your time. Have a fantastic weekend, and hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time. And yeah, God bless.